Rachel, Tuesday the 16th of July 2013. Morning. I'm on the 804, but I'm not going into London. I'm going to Whitney instead. I'm hoping that being there will jog my memory, that I'll get to the station and I'll see everything clearly. I'll know. I don't hold out much hope, but there's nothing else I can do. I can't call Tom. I'm too ashamed, and in any case, he's made it clear. He wants nothing more to do with me. Megan is still missing. She's been gone more than 60 hours now, and the story is becoming national news. It was on the BBC website and Mail Online this morning. There were a few snippets mentioning it on other sites too. I printed out both the BBC and Mail stories. I have them with me. From then, I gleaned the following. Megan and Scott argued on Saturday evening. A neighbour reported hearing raised voices. Scott admitted that they argued, and said that he believed his wife had gone to spend the night with a friend, Tara Epstein, who lives in Crawley. Megan never got to Tara's house. Tara says the last time she saw Megan was on Friday afternoon at their Pilates class. I knew Megan would do Pilates. According to Miss Epstein, she seemed fine, normal. She was in a good mood. She was talking about doing something special for her 30th birthday next month. Megan was seen by one witness walking towards Whitney train station at around 7:15 on Saturday evening. Megan has no family in the area. Both her parents are deceased. Megan is unemployed. She used to run a small art gallery in Whitney, but it closed down in April last year. I knew Megan would be arty. Scott is a self-employed IT consultant. I can't bloody believe Scott is an IT consultant. Megan and Scott have been married for 3 years. They have been living in the house on Blenheim Road since January 2012. According to the Daily Mail, their house is worth £400,000. Reading this, I know that things look bad for Scott. Not just because of the argument either. It's just the way things are. When something bad happens to a woman, the police look at the husband or the boyfriend first. However, in this case, the police don't have all the facts. They're only looking at the husband, presumably because they don't know about the boyfriend. It could be that I am the only person who knows that this boyfriend exists. I scrabble around in my bag for a scrap of paper. On the back of a card slip for 2 bottles of wine, I write down a list of most likely possible explanations for the disappearance of Megan Hipwell. 1. She has run off with her boyfriend, who from here on in I will refer to as B. 2. B has harmed her. 3. Scott has harmed her. 4. She has simply left her husband and gone to live elsewhere. 5. Someone other than B or Scott has harmed her. I think the first possibility is most likely, and 4 is a strong contender too, because Megan is an independent, willful woman. I'm sure of it. And if she were having an affair, she might need to get away to clear her head. Mightn't she? 5 does not seem especially likely, since murder by a stranger isn't all that common. The bump on my head is throbbing, and I can't stop thinking about the argument I saw, or imagined, or dreamed about, on Saturday night. As we pass Megan and Scott's house, I look up. I can hear the blood pulsing in my head. I feel excited. I feel afraid. The windows of number 15, reflecting morning sunshine, look like sightless eyes. Evening. I'm just settling into my seat when my phone rings. It's Kathy. I let it go to voicemail. She leaves a message. Hi, Rachel, just phoning to make sure you're okay. She's worried about me, because of the thing with the taxi. I just wanted to say that I'm sorry, about the other day. What I said about moving out, I shouldn't have. I overreacted. You can stay as long as you want to. There's a long pause, and then she says, give me a ring, okay, and come straight home, Rach. Don't go to the pub. I don't intend to. I wanted a drink at lunchtime. I was desperate for one after what happened in Whitney this morning. I didn't have one though, because I had to keep a clear head. It's been a long time since I've had anything worth keeping a clear head for. It was so strange, this morning, my trip to Whitney. I felt as though I hadn't been here in ages, although of course it's only been a few days. It may as well have been a completely different place though, a different station in a different town. I was a different person to the one who went there on Saturday night. Today, I was stiff and sober, hyper-aware of the noise and the light and the fear of discovery. I was trespassing. That's what it felt like this morning, because it's their territory now. It's Tom's and Anna's and Scott's and Megan's. I'm the outsider. I don't belong there, and yet everything is so familiar to me. Down the concrete steps of the station, right past the newspaper kiosk into Rosebery Avenue, half a block to the end of the T-junction, to the right, the archway leading to a dank pedestrian underpass beneath the track, and to the left, Blenheim Road, narrow and tree-lined, flanked with its handsome Victorian terraces. It feels like coming home. Not just any home, but a childhood home. A place left behind a lifetime ago. It's the familiarity of walking upstairs and knowing exactly which one is going to creak. The familiarity isn't just in my head, it's in my bones. It's muscle memory. This morning, as I walked past the blackened tunnel mouth, the entrance to the underpass, my pace quickened. I didn't have to think about it because I always walk a little faster in that section. Every night coming home, especially in winter, I used to pick up the pace, glancing quickly to the right just to make sure. There was never anyone there, not on any of those nights and not today. And yet I stopped dead as I looked into the darkness this morning, because I could suddenly see myself. I could see myself a few meters in, slumped against the wall, my head in my hands, and both head and hand smeared with blood. My heart thudded in my chest. I stood there. Morning commuters stepped around me as they continued on their way to the station, one or two turning to look at me as they passed. I stood stock still. I didn't know, don't know, if it was real. Why would I have gone into the underpass? What reason would I have had to go down there, where it's dark and damp and stinks of piss? I turned around and headed back to the station. I didn't want to be there any longer. I didn't want to go to Scott and Megan's front door. I wanted to get away from there. Something bad happened there, I know it did. I paid for my ticket and walked quickly up the station steps to the other side of the platform. And as I did, it came to me again in a flash. Not the underpass this time, but the steps. Stumbling on the steps and a man taking my arm, helping me up. The man from the train with the reddish hair. I could see him. A vague picture, but no dialogue. I could remember laughing at myself for something he said. He was nice to me, I'm sure of it. Almost sure. Something bad happened, but I don't think it had anything to do with him. I got on the train and went into London. I went to the library and sat at a computer terminal, looking for stories about Megan. There was a short piece on the Telegraph website, which said that a man in his 30s is helping police with their inquiries. Scott, presumably. I can't believe he would have hurt her. I know he wouldn't. I've seen them together. I know what they're like together. They gave a Crime Stoppers number too, which you can ring if you have information. I'm going to call it on the way home from a payphone. I'm going to tell them about B, about what I saw. My phone rings just as we get into Ashbury. It's Kathy again. Poor girl. She really is worried about me. Rach, are you on the train? Are you on your way home? She sounds anxious. Yes, I'm on my way. I'll be 15 minutes. The police are here, Rachel, she says, and my entire body goes cold. They want to talk to you. Wednesday, the 17th of July, 2013. Morning. Megan is still missing, and I have lied, repeatedly, to the police. I was in a panic by the time I got back to the flat last night. I tried to convince myself that they'd come to see me about my accident with the taxi, but that didn't make sense. I'd spoken to police at the scene. It was clearly my fault. It had to be something to do with Saturday night. I must have done something. I must have committed some terrible act and blacked it out. I know it sounds unlikely. What could I have done? Gone to Blenheim Road, attacked Megan Hipwell, disposed of her body somewhere, and then forgotten all about it? It sounds ridiculous. It is ridiculous. But I know something happened on Saturday. I knew it when I looked into that dark tunnel under the railway line, my blood turning to ice water in my veins. Blackouts happen, and it isn't just a matter of being a bit hazy about getting home from the club, or forgetting what it was that was so funny when you were chatting in the pub. It's different. Totally black. Hours lost, never to be retrieved. Tom bought me a book about it. Not very romantic, but he was tired of listening to me tell him how sorry I was in the morning, when I didn't even know what I was sorry for. I think he wanted me to see the damage I was doing, the kind of things I might be capable of. It was written by a doctor, but I have no idea whether it was accurate. The author claimed that blacking out wasn't simply a matter of forgetting what had happened, but having no memories to forget in the first place. His theory was that you get into a state where your brain no longer makes short-term memories, and while you're there, in deepest black, you don't behave as you normally would, because you're simply reacting to the very last thing that you think happened, because since you aren't making memories, you might not actually know what the last thing that happened really was. He had anecdotes too, cautionary tales for the blacked-out drinker. There was a guy in New Jersey who got drunk at a 4th of July party. Afterwards, he got into his car, drove several miles in the wrong direction on the motorway, and plowed into a van carrying 7 people. The van burst into flames and 6 people died. The drunk guy was fine. They always are. He had no memory of getting into his car. There was another man, in New York this time, who left a bar, drove to the house he'd grown up in, stabbed its occupants to death, took all of his clothes, got back into his car, drove home and went to bed. He got up the next morning feeling terrible, wondering where his clothes were and how he'd gotten home. But it wasn't until the police came to get him that he discovered he had brutally slain 2 people for no apparent reason whatsoever. So it sounds ridiculous, but it's not impossible. And by the time I got home last night, I convinced myself that I was in some way involved in Megan's disappearance. The police officers were sitting on the sofa in the living room, a 40-something man in plain clothes and a younger one in uniform with acne on his neck. Kathy was standing next to the window, wringing her hands. She looked terrified. The policeman got up. The plainclothes one, very tall and slightly stooped, shook my hand and introduced himself as Detective Inspector Gaskell. He told me the PC's name as well, but I don't remember it. I wasn't concentrating. I was barely breathing. "What's this about?" I barked at them. "Has something happened? Is it my mother? Is it Tom?" "Everyone's all right, Miss Watson. We just need to talk to you about something you did on Saturday evening," Gaskell said. "It's the sort of thing they say on television. It didn't seem real. They wanted to know what I did on Saturday evening." "What the fuck did I do on Saturday evening?" "I need to sit down," I said, and the detective motioned for me to take his place on the sofa, next to Neck Acne. Kathy was shifting from one foot to the other, chewing on her lip. She looked frantic. "Are you all right, Miss Watson?" Gaskell asked me. He motioned to the cut above my eye. "I was knocked down by a taxi," I said. "Yesterday afternoon in London. I went to the hospital. You can check." "Okay," he said, with a slight shake of his head. "So, Saturday evening?" "I went to Whitney," I said, trying to keep the waver out of my voice. "To do what?" Neck Acne had a notebook out, pencil raised. "I wanted to see my husband," I said. "Oh, Rachel," Kathy said. The detective ignored her. "Your husband?" he said. "You mean your ex-husband, Tom Watson?" "Yes, I still bear his name. It was just more convenient. I didn't have to change my credit cards, email address, get a new passport, things like that." "That's right. I wanted to see him, but then I decided that it wasn't a good idea, so I came home." "What time was this?" Gaskell's voice was even, his face completely blank. His lips barely moved when he spoke. I could hear the scratch of Neck Acne's pencil and paper. I could hear the blood pounding in my ears. It was, I think it was around 6:30. I mean, I got the train around 6 o'clock. "And you came home?" "Maybe 7:30. I glanced up and caught Kathy's eye, and I could see from the look of her face that she knew I was lying. "Maybe a bit later than that. Maybe it was closer to 8. "Yes, actually, I remember now. I think I got home just after 8. I could feel the colour rising in my cheeks. If this man didn't know I was lying, then he didn't deserve to be on the police force. The detective turned around, grabbed one of the chairs, pushed under the table in the corner, and pulled it towards him in a swift, almost violent movement. He placed it directly opposite me, a couple of feet away. He sat down, his hands on his knees, head cocked to one side. "Okay," he said. "So you left around 6, meaning you'd be in Whitney by 6:30, and you were back here around 8, which means you must have left Whitney at around 7:30. Does that sound about right?" "Yes, that seems right," I said, that wobble back in my voice betraying me. In a second or two, he was going to ask me what I'd been doing for an hour, and I had no answer to give him. "And you didn't actually go to see your ex-husband, so what did you do during that hour in Whitney?" "I walked around for a bit." He waited to see if I was going to elaborate. I thought about telling him I went to a pub, but that would be stupid. That's verifiable. He'd asked me which pub, he'd asked me whether I'd spoken to anyone, as if I was thinking about what I should tell him. I realized that I hadn't actually thought to ask him to explain why he wanted to know where I was on Saturday evening, and that in itself must have seemed odd. That must have made me look guilty or something. "Did you speak to anyone?" he asked, reading my mind. "Go in any shops? Bars?" "I spoke to a man in the station." I blurted this out loudly, triumphantly almost, as though it meant something. "Why do you need to know this? What is going on?" Detective Inspector Gaskell leaned back in the chair. "You may have heard that a woman from Whitney, a woman who lives on Blenheim Road, just a few doors along from your ex-husband, is missing. We've been going door to door, asking people if they remember seeing her that night. or if they remember seeing or hearing anything unusual. And during the course of our inquiries, your name came up. He fell silent for a bit, letting this sink in. You were seen on Blenheim Road that evening, around the time that Miss Hipwell, the missing woman, left her home. Mrs. Anna Watson told us that she saw you in the street, near Miss Hipwell's home, not very far from her own property. She said that you were acting strangely and that she was worried. So worried, in fact, that she had considered calling the police. My heart was fluttering like a trapped bird. I couldn't speak, because all I could see at that moment was myself, slouching in the underpass, blood on my hands. Blood on my hands! Mine, surely. It had to be mine. I looked up at Gaskell, saw his eyes on mine, and I knew I had to say something quickly to stop him reading my mind. I didn't do anything, I said. I didn't. I just wanted to see my husband. Your ex-husband, Gaskell corrected me again. He pulled the photograph out of his jacket pocket and showed it to me. It was a picture of Megan. Did you see this woman on Saturday night? He asked. I stared at it a long while. It felt so surreal having her presented to me like that. The perfect blonde I'd watched, whose life I'd constructed and deconstructed in my head. It was a close-up shot, a professional job. Her features were a little heavier than I'd imagined, not quite so fine as those of Jess in my mind. Miss Watson, did you see her? I didn't know if I'd seen her. I honestly didn't know. I still don't know. I don't think so, I said. You don't think so? So you might have seen her? I'm not sure. Had you been drinking on Saturday evening? He asked. Before you went to Whitney, had you been drinking? The heat came rushing back to my face. Yes, I said. Mrs. Watson, Anna Watson, said that she thought you were drunk when she saw you outside her home. Were you drunk? No, I said, keeping my eyes firmly on the detective so that I didn't catch Kathy's eye. I'd had a couple of drinks in the afternoon, but I wasn't drunk. Gaskell sighed. He seemed disappointed in me. He glanced over at Nick at me, then back to me. Slowly, deliberately. He got to his feet and pushed the chair back to its position under the table. If you remember anything about Saturday night, anything that might be helpful to us, would you please call me, he said, handing me a business card. As Gaskell nodded somberly at Kathy, preparing to leave, I slumped back into the sofa. I could feel my heart rate starting to slow, and then it raced again as I heard him ask me, You work in public relations, is that correct? Huntington Whiteley? That's right, I said. Huntington Whiteley. He's going to check, and he's going to know I lied. I can't let him find out for himself. I have to tell him. So that's what I'm going to do this morning. I'm going to go round to the police station to come clean. I'm going to tell him everything. That I lost my job months ago. That I was very drunk on Saturday night, and I have no idea what time I came home. I'm going to say what I should have said last night. That he's looking in the wrong direction. I'm going to tell him that I believe Megan Hipwell was having an affair. Evening. The police think I'm a rubbernecker. They think I'm a stalker, a nutcase, mentally unstable. I should have never gone to the police station. I've made my own situation worse, and I don't think I've helped Scott, which was the reason I went there in the first place. He needs my help, because it's obvious the police will suspect that he's done something to her, and I know it isn't true, because I know him. I really feel that, crazy as it sounds. I've seen the way he is with her. He couldn't hurt her. Okay, so helping Scott was not my sole reason for going to the police. There was the matter of the lie, which needed sorting out. The lie about me working for Huntington Whiteley. It took me ages to get up the courage to go into the station. I was on the verge of turning back and going home a dozen times, but eventually I went in. I asked the desk sergeant if I could speak to Detective Inspector Gaskell, and he showed me to a stuffy waiting room, where I sat for over an hour until someone came to get me. By that time I was sweating and trembling like a woman on her way to the scaffold. I was shown into another room, smaller and stuffier still, windowless and airless. I was left there alone for a further 10 minutes before Gaskell and a woman, also in plain clothes, turned up. Gaskell greeted me politely. He didn't seem surprised to see me. He introduced his younger companion as Detective Sergeant Riley. She is younger than I am, tall, slim, dark-haired, pretty in a sharp-featured, vulpine sort of way. She did not return my smile. We all sat down and nobody said anything. They just looked at me expectantly. I remembered the man, I said. I told you there was a man at the station. I can describe him. Riley raised her eyebrows ever so slightly and shifted in her seat. He was almost medium height, medium build, reddish hair. I slipped on the steps and he caught my arm. Gaskell leaned forward, his elbows on the table, hands clasped together in front of his mouth. I think he was wearing a blue shirt. That's not actually true. I do remember a man, and I'm pretty sure he had reddish hair. And I think that he smiled at me, or smirked at me when I was on the train. I think that he got off at Whitney, and I think he might have spoken to me. It's possible I might have slipped on the steps. I have a memory of it, but I can't tell whether the memory belongs to Saturday night or to another time. There have been many slips, on many staircases. I have no idea what he was wearing. The detectives were not impressed with my tale. Riley gave an almost imperceptible shake of her head. Gaskell unclamped his hands and spread them out, palms upwards, in front of him. Okay. Is that really what you came here to tell me, Miss Watson? He asked. There was no anger in his tone. He sounded almost encouraging. I wished that Riley would go away. I could talk to him. I could trust him. I don't work for Huntington Whiteley any longer, I said. Oh. He leaned back in his seat, looking more interested. I left 3 months ago. My flatmate, well, she's my landlady, really. I haven't told her. I'm trying to find another job. I didn't want her to know because I thought she would worry about the rent. I have some money. I can pay my rent, but anyway. I lied to you yesterday about my job, and I apologize for that. Riley leaned forward and gave me an insincere smile. I see. You no longer work for Huntington Whiteley. You don't work for anyone, is that right? You're unemployed? I nodded. Okay, so you're not signing on. Nothing like that. No. And your flatmate, she hasn't noticed that you don't go to work every day? I do, I don't go to the office, but I go into London, the way I used to, at the same time and everything, so that she won't know. Riley glanced at Gaskell. He kept his eyes on my face, the hint of a frown between his eyes. It sounds odd, I know, I said, and I tailed off then. Because it doesn't just sound odd, it sounds insane when you say it out loud. Right. So you pretend to go to work every day? Riley asked me. Her brow knitted too, as though she were concerned about me, as though she thought I was completely deranged. I didn't speak or nod or do anything. I kept silent. Can I ask why you left your job, Miss Watson? There was no point in lying. If they hadn't intended to check out my employment record before this conversation, they bloody well would now. I was fired, I said. You were dismissed, Riley said, a note of satisfaction in her voice. It was obviously the answer she'd anticipated. Why was that? I gave a little sigh and appealed to Gaskell. Is this really important? Does it matter why I left my job? Gaskell didn't say anything. He was consulting notes that Riley had pushed in front of him, but he did give the slightest shake of his head. Riley changed tack. Miss Watson, I wanted to ask you about Saturday night. I glanced at Gaskell. We'd already had this conversation, but he wasn't looking at me. All right, I said. I kept raising my hand to my scalp, worrying at my injury. I couldn't stop myself. Tell me why you went to Blenheim Road on Saturday night. Why did you want to speak with your ex-husband? I don't really think that's any of your business, I said, and then quickly, before she had time to say anything else. Would it be possible to have a glass of water? Gaskell got to his feet and left the room, which wasn't really the outcome I was hoping for. Riley didn't say a word. She just kept looking at me, the trace of a smile still on her lips. I couldn't hold her gaze. I looked at the table. I let my eyes wander around the room. I knew this was a tactic. She was remaining silent, so that I would become so uncomfortable that I had to say something, even if I didn't really want to. I had some things I needed to discuss with him. Private matters? I sounded pompous and ridiculous. Riley sighed. I bit my lip, determined not to speak until Gaskell came back into the room. The moment he returned, placing a glass of cloudy water in front of me, Riley spoke. Private matters? She prompted. That's right. Riley and Gaskell exchanged a look. I wasn't sure if it was irritation or amusement. I could taste the sweat on my upper lip. I took a sip of water. It tasted stale. Gaskell shuffled the papers in front of him and then pushed them aside, as though he was done with them, or as though whatever was in them didn't interest him all that much. Miss Watson, your ex-husband's current wife, Mrs. Anna Watson, has raised concerns about you. She told us that you've been bothering her husband, that you have come to the house uninvited, that on one occasion, Gaskell glanced back at the notes, but Riley interrupted. On one occasion, you broke into Mr. and Mr. Watson's house and took their baby, their newborn baby. A black hole opened up in the center of the room and swallowed me. That is not true, I said. I didn't take. It didn't happen like that. That's wrong. I didn't take her. I got very upset then. I started to shake and cry. I said I wanted to leave. Riley pushed her chair back and got to her feet, shrugged at Gaskell and left the room. Gaskell handed me a Kleenex. You can leave any time you like, Miss Watson. You came here to talk to us. He smiled at me then, an apologetic sort of smile. I liked him in that moment. I wanted to take his hand and squeeze it, but I didn't, because that would have been weird. I think you have more to tell me, he said, and I liked him even more for saying tell me rather than tell us. Perhaps, he said, getting to his feet and ushering me towards the door. You would like to take a break. Stretch your legs, get yourself something to eat, then when you're ready, come back and you can tell me everything. I was planning to just forget the whole thing and go home. I was walking back towards the train station, ready to turn my back on everything. Then I thought about the train journey, about going backwards and forwards on that line, past the house, Megan and Scott's house, every day. What if they never found her? I was going to wonder forever. And I understand that this is not very likely, but even so, whether my saying something might have helped her. What if Scott was accused of harming her just because they never knew about Bea? What if she was at Bea's house right now, tied up in the basement, hurt or bleeding or buried in the garden? I did as Gaskell said. I bought a ham and cheese sandwich and a bottle of water from a corner shop and took it to Whitney's only park, a rather sorry little patch of land surrounded by 1930s houses and given over almost entirely to an asphalted playground. I sat on a bench at the edge of this space, watching mothers and childminders scolding their charges for eating sand out of the pit. I used to dream of this, a few years back. I dreamed of coming here, not to eat ham and cheese sandwiches in between police interviews, obviously. I dreamed of coming here with my own baby. I thought about the buggy I would buy, all the time I would spend in trotters and at the early learning center, sizing up adorable outfits and educational toys. I thought about how I would sit here, bouncing my own bundle of joy on my lap. It didn't happen. No doctor had been able to explain to me why I can't get pregnant. I'm young enough, fit enough. I wasn't drinking heavily when we were trying. My husband's sperm was active and plentiful. It just didn't happen. I didn't suffer the agony of the miscarriage. I just didn't get pregnant. We did one round of IVF, which was all we could afford. It was, as everyone had warned us it would be, unpleasant and unsuccessful. Nobody warned me it would break us, but it did. Or rather, it broke me, and then I broke us. The thing about being barren is that you're not allowed to get away from it. Not when you're in your 30s. My friends were having children. Friends of friends were having children. Pregnancy and birth and first birthday parties were everywhere. I was asked about it all the time. My mother, our friends, colleagues at work. When was it going to be my turn? At some point, our childlessness became an acceptable topic of Sunday lunch conversation. Not just between Tom and me, but more generally. What were we trying? What we should be doing? Do you really think you should be having a second glass of wine? I was still young, there was still plenty of time, but failure cloaked me like a mantle. It overwhelmed me, dragged me under, and I gave up hope. At the time, I resented the fact that it was always seen as my fault, that I was the one letting the side down. But as the speed which with he managed to impregnate Anna demonstrates, there was never any problem with Tom's virility. I was wrong to suggest that we should share the blame. It was all down to me. Lara, my best friend since university, had 2 children in 2 years, a boy first and then a girl. I didn't like them. I didn't want to hear anything about them. I didn't want to be near them. Lara stopped speaking to me after a while. There was a girl at work who told me casually, as though she were talking about an appendectomy or a wisdom tooth extraction, that she'd recently had an abortion, a medical one, and it was so much less traumatic than the surgical one she'd had when she was at university. I couldn't speak to her after that. I could barely look at her. Things became awkward in the office. People noticed. Tom didn't feel the way I did. It wasn't his failure for starters. And in any case, he didn't need a child like I did. He wanted to be a dad. He really did. I'm sure he daydreamed about kicking a football around in the garden with his son and carrying his daughter on his shoulders in the park. But he thought our lives could be great without children too. We're happy, he used to say to me. Why can't we just go on being happy? He became frustrated with me. He never understood that it's possible to miss what you've never had, to mourn for it. I felt isolated in my misery. I became lonely. So I drank a bit, and then a bit more, and then I became lonelier, because no one likes being around a drunk. I lost, and I drank, and I drank, and I lost. I liked my job, but I didn't have a glittering career, and even if I had, let's be honest, women are still only really valued for 2 things, their looks and their role as mothers. I'm not beautiful, and I can't have kids. So what does that make me? Worthless? I can't blame all this for my drinking. I can't blame my parents or my childhood, an abusive uncle or some terrible tragedy. It's my fault. I was a drinker anyway. I've always liked to drink, but I did become sadder, and sadness gets boring after a while, for the sad person and for everyone around them. And then I went from being a drinker to being a drunk, and there's nothing more boring than that. I'm better now about the children thing. I've got better since I've been on my own. I've had to. I've read books and articles. I've realized that I must come to terms with it. There are strategies, there is hope. If I straighten myself out and sobered up, there's a possibility that I could adopt. And I'm not 34 yet. It isn't over. I'm better than I was a few years ago, when I used to abandon my trolley and leave the supermarket if the place was packed with mums and kids. I wouldn't have been able to come to a park like this, to sit near the playground and watch chubby toddlers rolling down the slide. There were times at my lowest, when the hunger was at its worst, when I thought I was going to lose my mind. Maybe I did for a while. The day they asked me about it at the police station, I might have been mad then. Something Tom once said tipped over me, sent me sliding. Something he'd wrote, rather. I read it on Facebook that morning. It wasn't a shock. I knew she was having a baby, he'd told me, and I'd seen that pink blind in the nursery window, so I knew it was coming, but I've thought of the baby as her baby, until the day I saw the picture of him, holding his newborn girl, looking at her and smiling, and beneath he'd written, "So this is what all the fuss is about. Never knew love like this. Happiest day of my life." I thought about him writing that, knowing that I would see it, that I would read those words and they would kill me, and writing it anyway. He didn't care. Parents don't care about anything but their children. They are the center of their universe. They are all that really counts. Nobody else is important. No one else suffering or joy matters. None of it is real. I was angry. I was distraught. Maybe I was vengeful. Maybe I thought I'd show them my distress was real. I don't know. It was a stupid thing. I went back to the police station after a couple of hours. I asked if I could speak to Gaskell alone, but he said that he wanted Riley to be present. I liked him a little less after that. I didn't want to break into their home, I said. I did go there. I wanted to speak to Tom. No one answered the doorbell. "So how did you get in?" Riley asked me. "The door was open." "The front door was open?" I sighed. "No, of course not. The sliding door at the back, the one leading into the garden." "And how did you get into the back garden?" "I went over the fence. I knew the way in." "So you climbed over the fence to gain access to your ex-husband's house?" "Yes. There was always a spare key at the back. We had a place we hid it, in case one of us lost our keys or forgot them or something. But I wasn't breaking in. I just wanted to talk to Tom. I thought maybe the bell wasn't working or something." This was the middle of the day. During the week, wasn't it? "Why did you think your ex-husband would be at home? Had you called to find out?" Riley asked. "Jesus, will you just let me speak?" I shouted. And she shook her head and gave me that smile again, as if she knew me, as if she could read me. "I went over the fence," I said, trying to control the volume of my voice, and knocked on the glass doors, which were partly open. There was no answer. I stuck my head inside and called Tom's name. Again, no answer. But I could hear a baby crying. I went inside and saw that Anna, Mrs. Watson? Yes, Mrs. Watson was on the sofa sleeping. The baby was in the carry cot and was crying. Screaming, actually, red in the face. She'd obviously been crying for a while. As I said those words, it struck me that I should have told them that I could hear the baby crying from the street, and that's why I went round to the back of the house. That would have made me sound like less of a maniac. "So the baby's screaming, and her mother's right there, and she doesn't wake?" Riley asked me. "Yes." Her elbows were on the table, her hands in front of her mouth, so I couldn't read her expression fully. But I knew she thought I was lying. "I picked her up to comfort her, that's all. I picked her up to quieten her." "That's not all though, is it? Because when you woke Anna up, you weren't there, were you? You were down by the fence by the train tracks." "She didn't stop crying right away," I said. "I was bouncing her up and down, and she was still grizzling, so I walked outside with her." "Down to the train tracks?" "Into the garden." "Did you intend to harm the Watson's child?" I leapt to my feet then. Melodramatic, I know, but I wanted to make them see, make Gaskell see, what an outrageous suggestion this was. "I don't have to listen to this. I came here to tell you about the man. I came here to help you. And now what exactly are you accusing me of?" What are you accusing me of? Gaskell remained passive, unimpressed. He motioned at me to sit down again. Miss Watson, Mrs. Watson, Anna, mentioned to us during the course of our inquiries about Megan Hipwell. She said that you had behaved erratically in an unstable manner in the past. She mentioned this incident with the child. She said that you have both harassed her and her husband, that you continue to call the house repeatedly. He looked down at his notes for a moment. Almost nightly, in fact. That you refuse to accept that your marriage is over. That is simply not true, I insisted. And it wasn't. Yes, I called Tom from time to time, but not every night. It was a total exaggeration. But I was getting the feeling that Gaskell wasn't on my side after all, and I was starting to feel tearful again. Why haven't you changed your name? Riley asked me. Excuse me? You still use your ex-husband's name. Why is that? If a man left me for another woman, I think I'd want to get rid of that name. I certainly wouldn't want to share my name with my replacement. Well, maybe I'm not that petty. I am that petty. I hate that she's Anna Watson. Right, and the ring? The one on a chain around your neck? Is that your wedding band? No, I lied. It was my grandmother's. Is that right? Okay. Well, I have to say that to me, your behavior suggests that, as Mrs. Watson has implied, you are unwilling to move on, that you refuse to accept that your ex has a new family. I don't see what this has to do with Megan Hipwell, Riley finished. Well, the night Megan went missing, we have reports that you, an unstable woman who had been drinking heavily, was seen on the streets where she lived, bearing in mind that there were some physical similarities between Megan and Mrs. Watson. They don't look anything like each other. I was outraged at the suggestion. Jess is nothing like Anna. Megan is nothing like Anna. They're both blonde, slim, petite, pale-skinned. So I attacked Mrs. Hipwell thinking she was Anna. That's the most stupid thing I have ever heard, I said. But that lump on my head was throbbing again, and everything from Saturday night was still deep as black. Did you know that Anna Watson knows Megan Hipwell? Gaskell asked me, and I felt my jaw drop. What? No, they don't know each other. Riley smiled for a moment, then straightened her face. Yes, they do. Megan did some child minding for the Watsons. She glanced down at her notes. Back in August and September last year. I didn't know what to say. I couldn't imagine it. Megan in my home with her baby. The cut in your lip, is that from when you got knocked down the other day? Gaskell asked me. Yes, I bit it when I fell, I think. Where was it, the accident? It was in London, Theobald's Road, near Holborn. And what were you doing there? I'm sorry? Why were you in central London? I shrugged. I already told you, I said coldly. My flatmate doesn't know that I've lost my job, so I go into London as usual and I go to libraries to job hunt, to work on my CV. Riley shook her head. In disbelief, perhaps? Or wonder. How does anyone get to that point? I pushed my chair back, readying myself to leave. I'd had enough of being talked down to being made look like a fool, like a mad woman. Time to play the trump card. I don't really know why we're talking about this, I said. I would have thought that you would have better things to do, like investigating Megan Hipwell's disappearance, for example. I take it you've spoken to her lover? None of them said anything. They just stared at me. They weren't expecting that. They didn't know about him. Perhaps you didn't know. Megan Hipwell was having an affair, I said, and I started to walk to the door. Gaskell stopped me. He moved quietly and surprisingly quick. And before I could put my hand on the door handle, he was standing in front of me. I thought you didn't know Megan Hipwell, he asked me. I don't, I said, trying to get past him. Sit down, he said, blocking my path. I told them then about what I'd seen from the train, about how I often saw Megan sitting out on her terrace, sunbathing in the evenings or having coffee in the mornings. I told them about how last week I saw her with someone who clearly wasn't her husband, how I'd seen them kissing on the lawn. When was this? Gaskell snapped. He seemed annoyed with me, perhaps because I should have told them this straight away, instead of wasting all day talking about myself. It was Friday morning. So the day before she went missing, you saw her with another man? Riley asked me, with a sigh of expiration. She closed the file in front of her. Gaskell leaned back in his seat, studying my face. She clearly thought I was making it up. He wasn't so sure. Can you describe him? Gaskell asked. Tall, dark, handsome? Riley interrupted. I puffed my cheeks out. Taller than Scott Hipwell. I know because I've seen them together, Megan and Scott Hitwell. And this man was different, slighter, thinner, darker skinned, possibly an Asian man, I said. You could determine his ethnic group from the train, Riley said. Impressive. Who is Jess, by the way? I'm sorry? You mentioned Jess a moment ago? I could feel my face flushing again. I shook my head. No, I didn't, I said. Gaskell got to his feet and held out his hand for me to shake. I think that's enough. I shook his head, ignored Riley, and turned to go. Don't go anywhere near Blenheim Road, Miss Watson, Gaskell said. Don't contact your ex-husband unless it's important, and don't go anywhere near Anna Watson or her child. On the train on the way home, as I dissect all the ways that today went wrong, I'm surprised by the fact that I don't feel as awful as I might do. Thinking about it, I know why that is. I didn't have a drink last night, and I have no desire to have one now. I am interested, for the first time in ages, in something other than my own misery. I have purpose, or at least I have a distraction. Thursday, the 18th of July 2013, morning. I bought 3 newspapers before getting onto the train this morning. Megan had been missing for 4 days and 5 nights, and the story is getting plenty of coverage. The Daily Mail, predictably, has managed to find pictures of Megan in her bikini, but they've also done the most detailed profile I've seen of her so far. Born Megan Mills in Rochester in 1983, she moved with her parents to King Lynn's in Norfolk when she was 10. She was a bright child, very outgoing, a talented artist and singer. A quote from a school friend says she was a good laugh, very pretty and quite wild. Her wildness seems to have been exacerbated by the death of her brother Ben, to whom she was very close. He was killed in a motorcycle accident when he was 19 and she was 15. She ran away from home 3 days after his funeral. She was arrested twice, once for theft and one for soliciting. Her relationship with her parents, the Mail informs me, broke down completely. Both her parents died a few years ago, without ever being reconciled with their daughter. Reading this, I feel desperately sad for Megan. I realize that perhaps after all, she isn't so different from me. She's isolated and lonely too. When she was 16, she moved in with a boyfriend who had a house near the village of Holcombe in North Norfolk, the school friend says. He was an older guy, a musician or something. He was into drugs. We didn't see Megan much after they got together. The boyfriend's name is not given, so presumably they haven't found him. He might not even exist. The school friend might be making this stuff up to get her name in the papers. They skip forward several years after that. Suddenly Megan is 24, living in London, working as a waitress in a North London restaurant. There she meets Scott Hitwell, an independent IT contractor who is friendly with the restaurant manager, and the two of them hit it off. After an intense courtship, Megan and Scott marry, when she's 26 and he is 30. There are a few other quotes, including one from Tara Epstein, the friend with whom Megan was supposed to be staying with on the night she disappeared. She says that Megan is a lovely, carefree girl, and that she seemed very happy. Scott would not have hurt her, Tara says. He loves her very much. There isn't a thing Tara says that isn't a cliche. The quote that interests me is from one of the artists who exhibited their work in the gallery Megan used to manage, one Rajesh Gujral, who says that Megan is a wonderful woman, sharp, funny, and beautiful, an intensely private person with a warm heart. Sounds to me like Rajesh has got a crush. The only other quote comes from a man called David Clark, a former colleague of Scott's, who says, Megs and Scott are a great couple. They're very happy together, very much in love. There are some new pieces about the investigation too, but the statements from the police amount to less than nothing. They've spoken to a number of witnesses. They are pursuing several lines of inquiry. The only interesting comment comes from Detective Inspector Gaskell, who confirms that 2 men are helping the police with their inquiries. I'm pretty sure that means they're both suspects. One will be Scott. Could the other be B? Could B be Rajesh? I've been so engrossed in the newspapers that I haven't been paying my usual attention to the journey. It seems as though I've only just sat down when the train grinds to its customary halt opposite the red signal. There are people in Scott's garden. There are 2 uniformed police just outside the back door. My head swims. Have they found something? Have they found her? Is there a body buried in the garden or shoved under the floorboards? I can't stop thinking of the clothes on the side of the railway line, which is stupid, because I saw those there before Megan went missing. And in any case, if harm had been done to her, it wasn't by Scott. It can't have been. He's madly in love with her, everyone says so. The light is bad today. The weather turns, the sky is leaden, threatening. I can't see into the house. I can't see what's going on. I feel quite desperate. I cannot stand being on the outside. For better or worse, I'm a part of this now. I need to know what's going on. At least I have a plan. First, I need to find out if there's any way that I can be made to remember what happened on Saturday night. When I get to the library, I plan to do some research and find out whether hypnotherapy could make me remember, whether it is in fact possible to recover that lost time. Second, and I reckon this is important, because I don't think the police believed me when I told them about Megan's lover. I need to get in touch with Scott Hipwell. I need to tell him. He deserves to know. Evening. The train is full of rain-soaked people, steam rising off their clothes and condensing on the windows. The fog of body odour, perfume, and laundry soaps hangs oppressively above bowed, damp heads. The clouds that menaced this morning did so all day, growing heavier and blacker until they burst. Monsoon-like. This evening, just as the office workers stepped outside and the rush hour began in earnest, leaving the roads gridlocked and the tube station entrances choked with people opening and closing umbrellas. I don't have an umbrella and am soaked through. I feel as though someone has thrown a bucket of water over me. My cotton trousers cling to my thighs, and my faded blue shirt has become embarrassingly transparent. I ran all the way from the library to the tube station, with my handbag clutched against my chest to hide what I could. For some reason, I found this funny. There is something ridiculous about being caught in the rain, and I was laughing so hard, by the time I got to the top of Grains Road, I could barely breathe. I can't remember the last time I laughed like that. I'm not laughing now. As soon as I got myself a seat, I checked the latest on Megan's case on my phone, and it's the news I've been dreading. A 35-year-old man is being questioned under caution at Winnie Police Station regarding the disappearance of Megan Hipwell, missing from her home since Saturday evening. That's Scott. I'm sure of it. I can only hope that he read my email before they picked him up, because questioning under caution is serious. It means I think he did it. Although, of course, it is yet to be defined. It may not have happened at all. Megan might be fine. Every now and again it does strike me that she's alive and well and sitting on a hotel balcony with a view of the sea, her feet up on the railing, a cold drink at her elbow. The thought of her there both thrills and disappoints me, and then I feel sick for feeling disappointed. I don't wish her ill, no matter how angry I was with her for cheating on Scott, for shattering my illusions about my perfect couple. No. It's because I feel like I'm part of this mystery. I'm connected. I'm no longer just a girl on the train, going back and forth without a point or purpose. I want Megan to turn up safe and sound. I do. Just not quite yet. I sent Scott an email this morning. His address was easy to find. I googled him and found www.shipwellconsulting.co.uk, the site where he advertises a range of consultancies, cloud and web-based services, for business and non-profit organizations. I knew it was him, because his business address is also his home address. I sent a short message to the contact given on the site. Dear Scott, my name is Rachel Watson. You don't know me. I would like to talk to you about your wife. I do not have any information on her whereabouts. I don't know what has happened to her, but I believe I have information that could help you. You may not want to talk to me. I would understand that. But if you do, email me on this address. Yours sincerely, Rachel. I don't know if he would have contacted me anyway. I doubt that I would, if I were in his shoes. Like the police, he'd probably just think I was a nutter, some weirdo who's read about the case in the newspaper. Now I'll never know if he's been arrested. He may never get a chance to see the message. If he's been arrested, the only people who see it may be the police, which won't be good news for me. But I had to try. And now I feel desperate, thwarted. I can't see through the mob of people in the carriage across to their side of the tracks. My side. And even if I could, with the rain still pouring down, I wouldn't be able to see beyond the railway fence. I wonder whether evidence is being washed away, whether right at this moment, vital clues are disappearing forever. Smears of blood, footprints, DNA-loaded cigarette butts. I want to drink so badly, I can almost taste the wine on my tongue. I can imagine exactly what it will feel like for the alcohol to hit my bloodstream and make my head rush. I want a drink, and I don't want one. Because if I don't have a drink today, then it'll be 3 days. And I can't remember the last time I stayed off for 3 days in a row. There's a taste of something else in my mouth too. An old stubbornness. There was a time when I had willpower, when I could run 10k before breakfast and subsist weeks on 1,300 calories a day. It was one of the things Tom loved about me, he said. My stubbornness, my strength. I remember an argument, right at the end, when things were about as bad as they could be. He lost his temper with me. What happened to you, Rachel? He asked me. When did you become so weak? I don't know. I don't know where that strength went. I don't remember losing it. I think that over time it got chipped away, bit, by life, by the living of it. The train comes to an abrupt halt, brakes screeching alarmingly, at the signal on the London side of Whitney. The carriage is filled with murmured apologies as standing passengers stumble, bumping into each other, stepping on each other's feet. I look up and find myself looking right into the eyes of the man from Saturday night, the ginger one, the one who helped me up. He's staring at me, his startlingly blue eyes locked on mine, and I get such a fright I drop my phone. I retrieve it from the floor and look up again, tentatively this time, not directly at him. I scan the carriage. I wipe the steamy window with my elbow and stare out, and then eventually I look back over at him, and he smiles at me, his head cocked a little to one side. I can feel my face burning. I don't know how to react to his smile, because I don't know what it means. Is it, "Oh, hello, I remember you from the other night," or is it, "Ah, it's that piss girl who fell down the stairs and talked shit at me the other night," or is it something else? I don't know, but thinking about it now, I believe I have a snatch of soundtrack to go with a picture of me slipping on the steps, him saying, "You all right, love?" I turn away and look out the window again. I can feel his eyes on me. I just want to hide, to disappear. The train judders off, and in seconds we're pulling into Whitney Station, and people start jostling each other for position, folding newspapers and packing away Kindles and iPads as they prepare to disembark. I look up again and am flooded with relief. He's turned away from me. He's getting off the train. It strikes me then that I'm being an idiot. I should get up and follow him, talk to him. He can tell me what happened, or what didn't happen. He might be able to fill in some of the blanks at least. I get to my feet. I hesitate. I know it's already too late. The doors are about to close. I'm in the middle of the carriage. I won't be able to push my way through the crowd in time. The doors beep and close. Still standing, I turn and look out the window as the train pulls away. He's standing on the edge of the platform in the rain, the man from Saturday night, watching me as I go past. The closer I get to home, the more irritated with myself I feel. I'm almost tempted to change trains at Northcote, go back to Whitney and look for him. A ridiculous idea, obviously, and stupidly risky, given that Gaskell warned me to stay away from the area only yesterday. But I'm feeling dispirited about ever recalling what happened on Saturday. A few hours of, admittedly hardly exhaustive, internet research this afternoon confirmed what I suspected. Hypnosis is not generally useful in retrieving hours lost to blackout, because as my previous reading suggested, we do not make memories during blackout. There is nothing to remember. It is, will always be, a black hole in my timeline.